Apple Cash is an easy, convenient, and secure way to pay your friends because it's already built into your iPhone and lives within Messages. It all happens right in the chat. Then you can spend that money right away with Apple Pay. See? Easy peasy, and way more private than pay apps. Apple Cash. Find it in your Messages today. Services are provided by Green Dot Bank, member FDIC. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Snapple. Want to know another Snapple fact? The first hot air balloon passengers were a sheep, a duck, and a rooster. Ridiculous. Check out Snapple.com to find ridiculously flavored Snapple near you.
All right, welcome back to That's So Fringy podcast. I'm Kristin.
And I'm Rick.
And we have a very special episode for you today with a friend of ours named L.A. Marzulli.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to Karen Wilkinson. She came on our show with her book, Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. And she is a friend of L.A. And so we were able to get in touch with him and have him on. We talk Roswell. We talk Fatima.
Yeah.
I mean, all kinds of stuff. He's got like 30 movies. He's got like 13 and a half books. I mean, he's got all kinds of information. You could spend days just renting movies from him because they are really well done. I promise you. We just watched again the Roswell Revisited, and they're so well done. So well done. He's really got a gift and got a talent. So
yeah, he talks Nephilim, he talks UFOs, he makes connections between the spiritual. He is a Christian. So if you haven't heard of L.A. Marzulli, we got him here for you to be introduced to today. Hopefully you enjoy this episode. Hopefully you get tons of knowledge out of it, and hopefully you like, share, and subscribe, because we want to get this message out to as many people as we can. So leave a comment below. Let us know what you think. And with that, we're going to get into this episode with L.A. Marzulli. Walk like an Egyptian.
That's Egyptian, or that's like I'm having a seizure. I can't tell. I don't know. Going down.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back here on That's So Fringy podcast. My name is Rick.
And I'm Kristin.
And we are here with our new friend, L.A. Marzulli. He's been so gracious to come on to the show and talk a little bit about the things that we love to talk about, all of the fringy topics. We like to talk about Nephilim. We like to talk about UFOs. We like to talk about all of these things. And it turns out L.A. has been studying a lot of these things for most of his life. And he's given a lot of his time and energy and effort, written over 13 different books. Is that right, sir? 13?
We're at 13 and a half, and the other half is almost done. So 14 is going to get birthed this year.
Yeah. How many movies do you got out now? 30 movies.
30 films.
Yeah. And you've been all over, you've been covering things like the Fatima, and that's kind of coming up in the news right now, which is very interesting. We can talk about that later.
Sure.
But we've also got your series on the Nephilim, and the one that you're doing right now, and the one we want to talk about the most tonight is the UFO disclosure, going through all of the UFO disclosure and trying to help people understand that this stuff did happen, and there's credible evidence for that. And not only that, but the government is coming out and confirming all of that. And so in this last iteration of your series, you put out 7 and 8, which I thought were masterfully done, by the way, sir. Just the exoneration of these people that were there, like Major Jesse Marcel Sr., and I want you to talk a little bit about why this was burning in your heart so much to do that. What made you want to exonerate that? I mean, I get the gesture, but why you?
I was looking at Roswell when I was a kid, and all these. And you remember, this is like I grew up. I was born in 1950, so mid 60s, into the 70s. You're getting all these like reports on Roswell, and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And I looked at it, and I just always wondered, always wanted to be there. And then lo and behold, we were there last July. But in studying it and reading about it, I actually interviewed Jesse Marcel Jr., not senior. He passed away before I could get to him. And the family was stigmatized. There was like a cloud around them because of the Roswell incident. And a term I just came up with fairly recently. In my opinion, Jesse Marcel, the Marcel family, but specifically Jesse Marcel Sr., became the Lee Harvey Oswald of ufology.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt about it. He's the fall guy, Patsy. In the film, I'm talking to his granddaughter, Denise Marcel. And I asked her, was your dad a Patsy? Without any hesitation, no equivocation on her part. She looks right at the camera and she goes, absolutely. Absolutely. And then she continues from there. So the idea of exoneration came when I was interviewing Denise. That's when the title came, because I said, we're trying to kind of exonerate your grandfather and your father, which is what I think we did in the film. I mean, a lot of people look at it, a lot of kudos, that type of stuff, but he was the fall guy. He was a fall guy. And, thank God for Dr. Stanton Friedman, because he blew the whole thing open. And then you got, Randall and all these other guys that have written too and done a lot of homework. So I'm not the first guy to go in and look at it, but we took a completely different tack than everybody else. That's why exoneration. And we flew up to Montana and we interviewed Linda Marcel, which was a first, by the way, Jesse Marcel Jr.'s widow. And of course, I had interviewed Marcel Jr. Back in the Roswell days, and that is reenacted and is in the film. We also interviewed one of his closest friends, who was an anesthesiologist, and Dr. Richard O'Connor. And so, you get Tim Alberino, and then you get all these other vignettes in the film, people who have second-hand witnesses. I was told this by my grandmother, this type of stuff. And that just puts, in my opinion, to think that it was a weather balloon is just total nonsense. It was not a weather balloon. This is in the Roswell paper. This is what came in. It's a copy. But where is it? Yeah. Dan Wilmot apparently were the only persons in Roswell who have seen what they thought was a flying disc. This was July 8th. They were sitting on their porch at 105 South Penn last Wednesday night, about 10 o'clock, when a large glowing object zoomed out of the sky from the southeast going in a northwesterly direction at a high rate of speed. Wilmot, attention to it, and they both ran down and they checked it out. Mr. Wilmot said that it appeared to him about 1,500 feet in the air, going fast. He estimated between 400 and 500 miles per hour. In appearance, it looked oval, like two saucers put together. Essentially this.
Yep. And that's been fascinating people's minds for so long that, for you to come out with a film that's pretty much exonerating the whole thing, not only, this family, which I think is awesome, but it's really putting a stamp on the whole thing, saying, this has basically been proven to be true. And there's so many people that have leaked conversations and things like that. This has been basically proven to be true. And now we just need people to wake up to that and realize that now we have to think about this, right? What does that mean for everybody? How do we proceed from there once we know that information, that is true?
And this is where we are. So that was what I just read was from July 8th. This is July 9th. Ramey says excitement not justified. And he basically says, Fort Worth, an examination by the Army revealed last night that the mysterious object found on a lonely New Mexico ranch was a harmless, high-altitude weather balloon, not a grounded flying disc. In my opinion, it's an absolute lie. It's a complete 100% cover-up, and that's why Marcel, I mean, he got the raw end of a stick, man. He just got he got nailed. Absolutely nailed.
And for context, for those that don't know who Major Jesse Marcel Sr. is, just to help people understand, who was he and why would he have been the patsy?
Jesse Marcel Sr. was the intelligence officer of the 509th Bombing Group. The 509th Bombing Group, stationed in Roswell, New Mexico, dropped the atomic bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was the only flight group, it was the only bombing group on the planet that had atomic weapons.
So these just weren't just some Joe Schmo. They would have known the difference between a weather balloon.
It's insulting to the man's intelligence all day long. I mean,
and that's really what he did, right? Was intelligence.
Yeah. I mean, it's just nonsense. There's a picture which we show in the film of Jesse Marcel Sr. kneeling, and Ramey's to his right. And it's like he's holding the weather balloon, and he's kind of like, "You've got to be kidding me, right?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his face is like, "This is not
what we recovered," and you know it. In the film, we have a clip from Jesse Marcel Sr., and he looks right at the camera. He's in the debris field. He's an old man now, probably a few years before he passed away. He's an old man, and he says, they wanted me to come and speak up to the microphones, but that's not what I did. And General Ramey just said there was nothing to see here. It was just a weather balloon. And he looks right at the camera and he goes, "But we both knew differently." And then you've got the deathbed confession from Walter G. Haught, who basically states, remember, this thing was a deathbed confession, was an affidavit not to be opened right after his death. He was in Hangar 84. We went in there for Hangar 84.
I can't believe when I saw you guys go into Hangar 84, I was so excited for you.
I know. You could see my face. I'm like,
yeah.
When I walk in, I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. I've seen this thing since I was a kid. I mean, here I am standing in it. It was just unbelievable. Yeah. So Walter G. Haught stated in a deathbed confession, in an affidavit, that he was let into Hangar 84. He saw the crash disc, the UFO. He saw the bodies under a tarp. So, how many deathbed confessions do we need from people who were there? Colonel Hill, that's in the film, deathbed confession. He confessed to Jim and Carolyn Rankin, two pastors who were doing end of life, working with him, getting his affairs together. He died a month later after he told Jim and Carolyn that Roswell was not a weather balloon. He was an intelligence officer also. He was OSS, which is the forerunner of the CIA, and he was flown into Roswell 48 hours after they retrieved the bodies. One of them was still alive. Hill tried to communicate with it. It's all in the film. So, we've got some witnesses that are groundbreaking that no one else has ever revealed. And then, of course, getting in the Hangar 84 is, as my late business partner Richard Shaw used to say, a coup, because it really is. And my new business partner, Gil Zimmerman, and I, we've done, I think, out of the 10 films in the UFO series, and 10 is the last one, as far as we know. Okay. What is the Truth is the title of it. But Gil and I did basically 6.5 films together, 6 films together.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, we really, and now we're back on the On the Trail of a Nephilim series, and we're back to what we recorded last July. So, we're up to our eyeballs in films.
Yeah, I bet. And, just getting all of this information out right now is such an important thing, because as we spoke about from the beginning, the news is beginning to report these things. They're beginning to, the Pentagon's coming out and actually saying that they do have these craft. You're having people going before Congress. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he goes before Congress and tells them, yes, we have biologics, not of this world. Yes, David Grush. Thank you. Yeah, what do you think about all of this stuff coming out now, especially for you as somebody that's studied this for so long?
Well, the Vatican is now telling us now they're going to be the grand poobahs to let us know what is a real apparition and what's not a real apparition. What's supernatural. I mean, it's just amazing. Well, I wasn't contacted. I'm a frank supernaturalist. I've done 30 films on this stuff. I've written 13 and a half books on it. No one's contacting me. And as a Christian, born again, evangelical, I have a completely different take than what the Vatican guys are doing. Completely different take.
Yeah.
So I find it very interesting. I think it ties in with end times prophecy. The Pope is supposed to talk tomorrow about all this, and I will be watching it like a hawk. And then I'll come into this. I'm in my studio here. I will come into the studio and do a special update. Fatima, in my opinion, was a UFO event. That's what it was. I mean, we did 2 films on it. And now I understand why the Lord had me go and do 2 films there. Why the Lord had me go to Fatima on the 100th year anniversary of the so-called apparition. It was not Mary of the Bible. Sorry, it wasn't, with all due respect. People can believe what they want to believe, and I'm not going to disparage anyone's belief. If you believe that, penguins on the Arctic Circle is God, then you can, you're going to worship a penguin, then that's your right as a human being. Go worship a penguin. But I'm not going to buy into that. And I have a right to say, well, without disparaging you, sir or madam, worshiping a penguin really doesn't fly. Here's why. And so with that ridiculous analogy, the bottom line is Fatima, in my opinion, and I've been there. I spent 2 weeks in Portugal. Yeah. And the official narrative, it was Mary that appeared to the kids. But there's a parish priest by the name of Father Fiera who was writing everything down in longhand. So he was interviewing the witnesses. Father Fiera thought right from the get-go that this was demonic. Bully for him. Bully for him. So the 3 kids, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, they're young kids. Lucia's 10, Francisco's 9, Jacinta's 7. Young, illiterate children. They couldn't read or write. No school, 1917. There's hardly any cars, and people have never seen any type of aerial phenomenon at all. World War I is raging. The Bolsheviks just toppled the Tsar. Everybody's freaked out. Are the Russians going to come into Europe? We're all going to become communist. I mean, it's a very tumultuous, unprecedented time. A group of psychics get together. You never hear about this. And through the technique of automatic writing, which is an occult technique, which we're forbidden to do as born-again spirit-filled Christians. And the message is something wondrous will happen on May 13th in Portugal. And it's signed Stella Matutina. Well, Stella Matutina is the bright morning star. Gee, I wonder who that is. And May 13th, the entity appears to the 3 children. The rest is history. But Father Fiera was on top of this from day one. And he wrote all in longhand, what these eyewitnesses were saying. So that's May 13th. June 13th, there's a crowd of people that come in because the apparition has said, come back on the 13th of every month. When the children asked, where are you from? The apparition said, from the sky, not from heaven, from the sky. So you don't hear anything about this.
Right.
You hear anything about this. The apparition was wearing a short skirt that fell just below her knees. So Mary, the Bible, is going to be in a dress that's below the knees, not a skirt, a dress below the knees. I'm not buying that for a minute. And then see, here's the difference between the evangelical take and the Catholic Church take. We don't believe that Mary ascended into heaven. She's a sinner like all of us. Right. And she's in need of a savior. And what happened with the Catholic Church, they've put Mary almost on top of Jesus, almost. The dedication to Mary, 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 Mary. And it's like, Mary didn't hang on the cross and die for us, with all due respect to Mary. She is the God bearer. I have great respect to the biblical Mary all day long. She's blessed amongst all women. Totally get that. I get that. But she never ascended into heaven. That's concocted 400 years after the events of Calvary. I mean, it's a construct. So this whole thing is dressed up in Catholic clothes. And so May and June, July, the crowds are swelling. It's very controversial. August comes, the kids are incarcerated. They won't let the kids go to the apparition site. But the crowds are there. They're seeing flying hats. Now, what does a flying hat sound like to you in 1917? Right?
Sounds like a UFO to me. I mean, if I was going to name it.
Me too, because there was UFO and flying saucer are not part of a lexicon. That won't happen until the mid 40s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's why people, have to think like they think in order to understand what they're trying to say.
What they're trying to communicate. So September comes, and you've got all these, clergy and the mayor of the town. I mean, all these people are, look, we need a sign from this entity, whoever she is.
Right.
So the kids go back and ask her, we need to see a sign. And the entity goes, there's going to be a sign on October 13th. The crowds swell up to, I would say, 70,000 people. I mean, nobody really knows how many, but 70,000 is probably a realistic estimate of what was there. Now, remember, this is 1917. Not everybody has a car. It's out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, Fatima is in the middle of nowhere back in 1917.
Mm-hmm.
Most people had never seen any type of aerial phenomena at all. That includes airplanes.
Yeah.
1917. So, maybe a few people did, but most people didn't. 70,000 people were there. It's been raining all night and all morning. There's one picture. It just shows a sea of umbrellas. Well, it stops raining. Clouds part. All of a sudden, clouds come back. A cloud moves in front of the sun. Out of that cloud comes what? A dull spinning disc like this, wobbling. It falls to earth like this. How do we know that? Eyewitness handwritten testimonies by Father Fiera. Now, that's a completely different story than the official narrative.
Yeah.
When Jose Machado and Fina de Armada, let me back up. Fina de Armada was doing research, writing a paper for college on influential women of the 20th century in Portugal. She picked Lucia, the eldest of the three seers.
Okay.
She has access to the sanctuary in Fatima, where Father Fiera's papers are kept, all this other stuff. Okay, great. She goes in there, and she's a believer. She's heard this story since she was a kid. Sure. She believes the official narrative, like who wouldn't, right? She starts reading Father Fiera's stuff, and she's not allowed to photograph anything, not allowed to write anything. She's got a tape recorder. She is reading as fast as she can, obviously in Portuguese, into the tape recorder. And she's like, her mind is completely blown because it's a totally different story than what she's grown up with. And that is the can of worms. That opens up the door. She teams up with Joaquim Fernandez. They write 3 books together, I believe. I read them all. They were in my library before it burned. I interviewed Fina de Armada's daughter because she passed away in 2014. I got there in 2017. I did interview Joaquim Fernandez, which was just a fantastic interview, as well as other experts as part of that team. So Fina is in the archives at Fatima, and it's a completely different story. There's also a 4th witness that you never hear about, Caroline Carrera. You never hear about this woman. She was the one that saw several weeks before the apparition. She saw a blonde-haired androgynous being under the same tree that the apparition would eventually appear over. And this entity, this blonde-haired androgynous being in a long white smock, communicated with her telepathically and said, "Come here, come here." And Caroline was freaked out, and she didn't. She was scared. And the sheep were petrified. The sheep weren't moving at all. She's a shepherdess like everybody else was back then. And so when she looks to the sheep, she looks back. The child, this little androgynous being with the long blonde hair, is floating above the treetops. That's the same tree that the apparition, so-called apparition, would appear to the 3 children several weeks later. Fina de Armada did her homework. Bully for Fina. She's the one that blew this whole thing open anyway. Yeah. When there's a man by the name of Jose Machado, And in Spanish, it would be Jose, but in Portuguese, it's Jose. Jose Machado. I don't speak Portuguese, by the way. It's a very difficult language.
Yeah.
Jose Machado got access to the sanctuary. Machado is a professor of semiotics. He studies film. Okay. Joshua Benolio in 1917 was the King of Portugal's royal photographer. Now, the monarchy had been replaced by the Republic, but he was still the king's royal photographer. So everybody this was national. Everybody's watching this thing. Joshua Benolio is in the field at Fatima on October 13th, 1917. He takes 10 or 12 pictures. I think it's 12 pictures. Jose Machado had access to those pictures. Almost 100 years, no one had looked at them.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
No one knew where they were. This is all in the film. But, don't rent that film for $4.99, whatever you do.
We highly recommend all of your films. I mean, there's so many things that everybody in our audience can learn from these. And these are deep dives. These aren't these aren't yes, exactly.
The experts. I'm giving you the tip of the iceberg, folks.
Right. No, we go through the same thing with the podcast. We did a 3 or 4 part series on the JFK assassination and why it wasn't what they said it was. And we still had people that contacted us and wanted us to answer more questions. And we're like, just look it up. You got to do some research on your own. Yeah. We did as much as we could.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I've been a student of the JFK assassination forever.
Yeah.
Never believed the Warren Report when it came out. I was 14 when the thing came out. I would argue with my dad. Said, "Dad, this doesn't make any sense. Nothing makes any sense here." But I'm a student of JFK. But I digress. So here's the deal. Jose Machado goes in, and it's not like you walk in, knock at the door. I'd like to look at the glass plates from Joshua Benolio. It's a whole thing and paperwork. And so he gets there. No one knows where the glass plates are. It's Raiders of the Lost Ark when they take the Ark of the Covenant and they put it in the crate and they Pop schleps down and it makes a left. You never see the thing again. It took them 3 hours to find it. The glass plates were in a shoebox up in a closet someplace.
Wow,
not making this up.
Just sitting there.
So he examined the glass plates. The one that we published, and all of those books burned in the fire. We're getting ready. It's a very small book, like 60 pages. It's very, very small. But we published that because it's the only we broke that story.
Yeah.
It's before Gil Zimmerman and Richard Shaw and I had parted. Richard was into the Ark of the Covenant. In 2017, we're over in Portugal. I'm doing independent films. And, Gil comes in later. Jose Machado found a picture, and it's in the film. And we interviewed Jose Machado in the film as well. That picture shows the apparition site. On the right-hand side, there's a column of smoke, which rises straight up and then makes a 90-degree turn. And right here, almost dead center of the photograph, is a dull silver disc. Now, it's a black and white, but it's a disc-like object. There's no doubt. It is a disc-like object sitting there. And we grilled Machado and said, Jose, is this a scratch, a chemical burn, an artifact? He goes, absolutely not. Whatever this is intrinsic in the film. He also found on those glass plates other very troubling details that had escaped everyone. And he shared some of those with us in the film.
Yeah. You guys got it. You guys got to rent it. It's incredible. And I've watched it. I've done the deep dive into all of this. Like you said, the Pope's going to be talking about it tomorrow. So for those of you that are interested in that, get the series so you know what he's talking about and whether he's telling the truth or not, right? That's what we're going to find out. But we want to get back to Roswell because this is what you've got going on right now. And Roswell, again, it's in everybody's mind. And we know that the the number 7 film was the exoneration, talking about Jesse Marcel and all of that. But you also went to the actual debris field where the craft had landed, right? Yeah, and that's the second one, the evidence from the debris field. And that's number 8, right, in the series, Revisiting Roswell?
Correct.
And that one was incredible, just being able to see the site, the actual place. And we're talking middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's very remote.
And so for people to understand, you really have to understand the gravity of where they found this and who were the first people to get there and all of those different things. The way you guys lay it out is amazing.
Thank you.
And I couldn't encourage people enough to get a hold of this, because it really does wrap it all up for people, in my opinion. I mean, you don't need to watch anything else. You've pretty much wrapped it up.
Thank you. I take that compliment. I'll pass it over to Gil. Gil and I worked long and hard on this film. And I think it speaks for itself. The cinematography is great. The drone shots are incredible of the debris field. And when you sit out in the middle of nowhere, it is literally in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you would never, and Jesse Marcel Sr. states this in the film, Exoneration, he never would have found it without a guide. You just would never, because I'll give you an example. We drove on a 4-lane highway, right? 2 lanes on the right, 2 lanes on the left. We drove on that outside of Roswell almost an hour. Then we made a left turn on a 2-lane country road. And we're on that for like 35, 40 minutes. There's nothing around. There's cattle. Then we make a left turn. Now we're on a gravel cattle road, free range cattle. And as you're driving, there's some cows over there, we got to stop and let the cows cross, that type of thing. We're on that for 35 minutes. Now we stop at a cattle gate, and Frank Kimbler opens the cattle gate, and we drive through. Now we're 4-wheeling for 20, 25 minutes, and we get to the debris. If you don't know where it is, you'd never find it. We get to the debris field, and you walk down into it. And it's we found 2 pieces of metal.
Yeah.
But the powers that be, this is from a debris field, the powers that be have taken spikes like this and pounded them all over the debris field, because guys with metal detectors get false readings like this.
Wow.
But Frank Kimbler, who was our guide, and we interview him in the film, knew exactly where to go, because he's found other pieces of metal. And we found 2 pieces of metal. This is what it looks like right there.
Yeah.
And it was
incredible.
Buried about 6 to 8 inches below the surface. We had the metal tested.
Yeah, and just to think that, just watching that film and being there along with you guys, going through that with you, watching the dig, watching the piece come out of the ground. It's almost like watching an action movie for me, somebody that's been thinking about Roswell for so long, thinking about, did this actually happen? And then you go ahead and exonerate this guy in the first one, which I loved. And then you go further into the story, into the debris field, where not only are you exonerating him, but you're saying that this is actually the spot. We're pulling metal out of the ground. And, kudos to all of those involved for making all that happen, because, just being able to see those visuals, not all of us can afford to fly over there and to do the work that you're doing. So when you say, it's a couple dollars here to see these films, that helps you to continue your work.
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Literally, that's the whole point. It keeps us on the trail. This is real investigative journalism. That's
what I love about it, because you guys are doing it the real way. Even in your, the way that you send things to the lab, I really appreciate, because you don't just send it to one lab, you send it to multiple labs, and you're not, and you've done that before with other findings.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate the way that you do that. And I think that the skeptic would always, be easily swayed to say, well, they had it tested at one lab, blah, blah, blah. But why do you do it that way? And And is it to curb the skeptics or get just a second opinion?
Well, we always want to get a second opinion. Always, always, always. I mean, with the DNA evidence, we had 3 labs that we were testing on the Paracas skulls right behind me. And, I mean, all of them, we tested, let's say, the baby skull, which is this guy right here. I mean, we tested this thing 3 different times at 3 different labs. It came back U2E1. No collusion between the labs. And it had red hair. This was a mummy, a 2,000-year-old mummy that we unwrapped at Senior Juan's Paracas Museum. Thank you, Brian Forrester, for putting that together, because it was Brian that, alerted me to what was going on. And we saw it the first time we were down there. And then the second year when we came down again, that's when Senior Juan allowed us to unwrap the mummy skull. That's all in our Watchers series. Who gets to do that? I mean, that's real investigative journalism.
Yeah, and how many people know that you've already done it? And that's my question to the audience is, how many of you actually know of L.A. Marzulli's work, and how much further can we push this information? Because people need to know this stuff. You're making connections to things that really matter in the world, like where did we come from? Who are these people? What are these apparitions that they're talking about? And how do you marry or how do you be, a born again Christian, as you said, fully immersed in your faith and also traveling on this journey that some would say is almost a religion in itself, this ufology, where some people could take it that way, where if you get off the rails, I think some people have. But how do you balance those two?
Well, the Lord called me into this. This is not something that I would have signed up for 44 years ago when I came to Jesus. I was a musician. I was a rock musician. I'm a classically trained pianist. I not a concert pianist, but a classically trained pianist. And I've been composing since I was 7 years old. I was in, groups. I was a worship leader for 25 years. All I ever wanted to do was make Christian music. And I mean, I tried over and over and over again, and the door never opened. And why I kept trying and trying, the Lord kept going like this. Okay, I know that. You just come over here now, and you don't understand, but I've really created you to do this because you're really good at this. But trust me, you don't know that yet. I'd never spoken in front of an audience. I had no interest in making films. I had no interest in writing books. Not even on the radar.
Sure.
Not even there. Not even like the book thing. I was toying with writing a novel back in my 20s, but nothing ever came of it. I was a musician. I was a rock musician. Yeah. Classically trained rock musician. I had bands, and we were in and out of studios. I was signed to production deals and manager deals and all this stuff. And I mean, we came this close a gazillion times, but the Lord, I'd be dead by now, guys. If I had been signed, I wouldn't be here. There's no doubt. Sure. And so, as a worship leader, and that was great, and I loved it. But I could barely say good morning to the people. I was tongue tied. And when the Lord raised me up into this, I mean, I'll be 74 in December, so getting up there, and I just want to finish really strong. My hand is on the plow. That's why 30 films, 13 and a half books, and 14 will be out this year. 15 will be out next year. I've already got 6 chapters on 15. Wow. If the Lord tarries. He's created me for this. And I'm boasting here, but I'm really good at it. I mean, that's what everybody,
those that are created to do things, hopefully they're also equipped, And
he's equipped me for it. I mean, go figure. I mean, I just love talking about all this in front of people at a conference. Just love it. Yeah. More than anything. It's a hoot, And the Lord's given me what I call Holy Spirit humor, because nothing is scripted when I stand before an audience. Every time it's always different. And we just start, and the Lord kind of takes over, and sometimes I crack myself up because it's really funny. It's like,
that's how I am. I don't usually write anything down.
a cool community of people, that's for sure.
So, I mean, that's how all this happened. I was also in the New Age. My third eye was open. I was with the guru for 3 years. I was at Woodstock. I was into Eastern mysticism. Don Juan, Carlos Castaneda. I was totally into that. I was into the fakirs, the assassins in India, stuff like that. I mean, I was in the New Age, completely in the New Age. And then after I had exhausted all that, that's when the Lord, 44 years ago, took me out of the kingdom of darkness. And that was like 3 years of heavy, intense spiritual warfare.
I bet. Yeah, I mean, when you do certain things, you're attaching certain things. And to get those unattachments, it usually takes about the time that 7 years. What did they used to say in Judaism? If you're unclean, it takes you about 7 years to get that stench off of you, and it's kind of a spiritual law, right? You get that little bit of stench on you, but that's going to last for a while, and it takes a while to get that off of you. And so anyway, just knowing that there is somebody out there that's doing this work and putting together all of these connections, it seems to me that you're trying to walk people down a path of understanding when it comes to the spiritual and the UFOs, and being able to marry that in a way that people can really understand from a Christian perspective, because we can, right? We can make sense of it from a Christian standpoint. Why don't you talk just a little bit, if you don't mind, just about kind of where that started, where you started making those connections, that these might be some sort of spiritual or interdimensional beings?
Well, Dr. I.D.E. Thomas's book, The Omega Conspiracy, that was a life-changing book for me. He was the one that connected the Nephilim, Genesis 6, into the whole thing. And my battle buddy, Russ Dizdar, he was the one that got me into Fritz Zimmerman's book, On the Trail of a Nephilim. I mean, that's where all of it came, from Fritz, from Fritz's work. And then going to the Newark Circle Mound, the Octagon Mound, all these different sites with Fritz, America's Stonehenge with Fritz. But then we went to Peru without Fritz. And that became, this whole other deal. So, I mean, we have been on the Trail of a Nephilim. I think we've built on Dr. I.D.E. Thomas's work. We always give him credit. Sure. Gary Stearman is the one that illuminated Genesis 3:15 in ways that Dr. Thomas, or anybody else for that matter, had ever done, to the best of my knowledge. And basically, Gary Stearman was at the On the Trail of a Nephilim series and conference rather, and his title was "It's All About the Seed." It's all about the seed, and he opened up Genesis 3:15. We all knew Genesis 6, but we had never looked at Genesis 3:15.
Yeah.
In my opinion, Genesis 3:15 is the gateway to the rest of the biblical prophetic narrative, because in that little vignette, you got the pre-incarnate Christ who was there. Adam and Eve have just fallen. You got the dragon who's been tempting Eve for who knows how long. And the Lord told me something last weekend, 2 weeks ago now, this coming weekend, 2 weeks ago, when actually it's 1 week ago, but who cares? So when Adam and Eve are hiding from the Lord, they are terrified, absolutely terrified. They know something's happened, but they don't know what. They are terrified. They are absolutely in panic mode all day long. So now they're here. They're standing together. Dragon's over here. Pre-incarnate Christ. And Jesus says to the dragon, your seed, your offspring will be at war, at enmity with the seed, the offspring of the woman. What's coming from the woman, the proto-evangelion, the Messiah, will crush your head, you'll bruise his heel. It's the entire Bible.
Yep.
It's a seed war. It's a seed war. And if people don't understand that, when they get to Genesis 6, the flood of Noah, God seems like this vengeful, capricious, bloodthirsty God. When they get to the Tower of Babel, same thing. Sodom and Gomorrah, what is he doing? Finally, the conquest of Canaan. This is what people like Richard Dawkins use. And if you don't know about the seed war, Dawkins is right. And I agree with him. When I read that 44 years ago as I'm reading through the Bible, I almost threw the Bible up against the wall. I can't do this. Jesus, I get. This guy in the Old Testament, no. Can't be the same people. Can't be. Well, it is. But I didn't know the seed war till decades later. And that changed my life.
It really does. It really opens up the Bible in a new way. It helps people really understand that, you know, it's been hidden in there the whole time. But I think it's been intentionally hidden. And now I believe that God is allowing people to kind of open their eyes to this, and more people are getting access to people that understand it, like yourself, that can articulate it in a way that helps people really understand. And not only that, but you've written books, full series on this stuff. And so to be able to bring all that together in a person's mind, I think really helps them with their Bible, but also making sense of what's going on in the physical, what they actually see. And it's a great marriage that you make, and I appreciate it. Yeah. So going back to Roswell a little bit, because I know you've got coming up is Your Truth. Is that what it's called? It's called What is the Truth? What is the Truth? That's right. So after this is kind of your last one in the UFO series. So What is the Truth? Is that going to be kind of a wrap up of the whole thing?
No, okay. Is. And I don't want to give away the farm. There is a pre-sale on it for the DVDs. Again, you'll be able to stream it. But we discovered some really interesting scriptures. And I weigh in on both films, 9 and 10, what I think is going to happen.
Okay.
And it's very, very sobering. Very sobering.
Yeah, it is. And I think a lot of people are seeing that something is going on right now. A lot of people are beginning to not only do we have this coming out in the news right now that UFO phenomenon is real and all of this stuff's all real, but we're also seeing a lot of supernatural and spiritual stuff on social media and news a lot more. You're beginning to see more and more about God, and more about the Bible, and more about Nephilim and the Watchers, and all of these different things are permeating the collective consciousness of the world right now. And I think people are seeing that there's something happening. We're moving towards something, and it's very interesting to think of what that might be, and how people would take it, because I know in some of the things that you've investigated, some of the things you've talked about, there's a very real possibility that there could be some sort of a alien invasion of sorts. And I just don't know if people realize that's a real possibility. If what we said before, you're proving that these things actually happen, that they've actually appeared before. Where are they from? I don't think so much is a matter of debate at this point, but are they going to come again? I think is what everybody's always wondering. Are they coming again? And I think that those are what the things that you're trying to answer in this next film. So I think people are just going to have to pre-order that and wait to see what your thoughts on that are, because, Ellie, we know that your time is precious, and we've got lots and lots more that we can talk about. But we would love to have you on more to talk about more things. If you have the time and the willingness, that would be so awesome.
Yeah, it's been a good interview. Thank you for having me on. Streaming.lamarzulli.net, streaming.lamarzulli.net. If you want to buy the hard copies, you go to lamarzulli.com. So, it's 30 films, 13 and a half books. It's a lot of material. Yeah. People need to start doing their homework. It's just as simple as that.
Yep. And these films are really well done. I mean, not that I'm any type of expert on the subject, but they're really well done.
Thank you.
They're
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Glory to the King.
Yeah.
Well,
That's right.
Well, you're
guys.
in your wheelhouse. You're doing, if you know, and this is what we've found in our lives, in our marriage, all of that stuff is when you're on the narrow path, it's difficult, but it feels right. You know that you're in the right place. And then, obviously we tend to stray off as human beings, but
Yeah.
but God's given us a gift of the Holy Spirit to go, hey, let's get back over here and get back into your wheelhouse.
That's great. That's really great.
All right, LA, thank you so much. And
Thank you,
for
guys.
those of you that are listening, don't forget it's stream.lamarzulli.net, net. And LA, we hope to talk to you again soon. Thank you so much for coming on.
Good, guys. Take care.
All right, talk soon.
Bless you.
Bye-bye.